Today, we're looking at Elixir's Tangerine. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Elixir's Tangerine is an orange ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples, I put the ink into a different pen for a day, I then put it into a Nimicine Singularity with a fine nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we look at the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography. And I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down, immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this really pink color, very, very light pink, pushing its way up. And then we get that dark, rich yellow, not a highlighter yellow, a dark, rich yellow. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And we do see a kind of pink line staying in place. The pink pushes its way up. It does get mixed with the yellow still, showing us some of the orange that's going to be the color of this ink. And then we don't see as much of that yellow, that rich yellow at the top. The ink did not travel as far. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, the lowercase h does blow out, become a little blurry. I do think this ink is a little too light to use in a note-taking situation on a full page of reading. Water is only lifting the other tones off. It's not moving that yellow at all. That yellow is still very much there, not budging. Pen flush is absolutely removing this from the paper. This is going to be all that you need to remove it from your pen. We're easily seeing the white of the paper coming through, and we're easily seeing the dots from the Rhodia dot pad. Now, 1/3 bleach solution, as is normal, has completely removed it from the page, but there's no need to use that to get this out of your pen. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with a realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Elixir's Tangerine has a viscosity of 3.6, making this a very dry ink. And it does need to be a wet ink at this light a color. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Elixir's Tangerine has an average dry time of 19 seconds, making it normal. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in bottle form, and I got to tell you, when you look at how light that is, it makes you worry that you're going to be able to read it. And you can defeat that depending on the pen that you choose. Now, to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding and no ghosting, the 1.1. It's a nice orange here with the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. Some shading. This ink can shade really well. It's not showing it as nice here. It does shade well with the 1.1. It just doesn't show off as well. The E is dark. It gets very light to a yellow in between the E and the L. It stays pretty as that orange through, and then it starts to show that yellow through in the R. It's very nice shading, and it does this a lot. The extra fine is the same tone as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it has some really nice shading going on here. I know the camera's having a little bit of trouble with this. See if I can go with manual focus, if it'll help. The shading is absolutely fantastic. Over starts very dark, or sorry, very light and gets very dark. Quick starts very dark, gets very light and very dark again. Brown starts dark, gets light, gets dark again. And it's beautiful throughout all of the writing. It's 13 seconds to dry. Now it shows as very light here, okay? And it is very light. But with the right nib choice, this ink pops. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine, but because more ink goes down, it's easier to read.
The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it has gorgeous, gorgeous shading. It's a sunset type shading. I know it says tangerine, but it shades like it's sunset. In quick, it starts very dark, it gets very light, it gets very dark, and in the K, it's got dark on the bottom, light at the top. Wonderful. Brown is light at the top and dark at the bottom. In the B, dark in the R, light in the O, dark at the beginning of the W, but light at the back of the W, at the end of the W. Beautiful. Fox starts light and gets dark. Nice. 19 seconds to dry. The Scrubby shows us a lot of color variation, and it has a lot of color variation. But the base color is so light that when we see the smear, it's almost all gone. We see yellow come through, none of the orange, not recoverable if you smear. Tomoe River, no bleeding. Is that Tomoe River ghosting, or is it the page underneath? Yeah. See, very little ghosting with a blank page. This is part of the reason that I don't care for Tomoe River. If you have writing underneath, it's very hard to, tell. No bleeding, very little ghosting, though 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. And there is some shading that comes through even on Tomoe River. Tangerine starts nice and dark, becomes a nice mid-tone, gets a little light at the beginning of the I, and then gets very dark to the E. Beautiful. The extra fine is the same tone as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and lovely, lovely shading throughout all of the writing. Quick starts dark, gets light, gets dark, gets light, gets dark again, very dark at the K. Brown starts with a very light at the bottom, kind of sweeping up, and then it gets to a mid-tone at the top and very dark at the bottom of the B. It stays dark, becomes a mid-tone on the ow, and very dark on the N. Fox starts dark, or starts light and works its way very dark at the X. It's beautiful, and 18 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the 1.1, but again, because we're getting more ink, it is easier to read. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and amazing, absolutely amazing shading. I just go to there we go. We're on autofocus. Look at what's going on in quick in this shading, where it's light at the top and then it gets dark and the U gets much like to a mid-tone and then the ick very dark. Look at what's going on inside the right here. Nice and light spaces through the dark writing. Over starts nice and light and works its way really dark. It has some beautiful, beautiful shading here. 25 seconds to dry. Very worth it to me. The Scrubby for both show us plenty of shading, and this is on Tomoe River. But the smear test, again, the base color is so light, I don't think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting, though 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and that beautiful shading all over it. I am not going to keep coming in and showing this shading and making a big deal because I realize I'm like 5 minutes into this part. But beautiful shading throughout all of this writing. The extra fine is the same tone as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it has that gorgeous shading all over it. Because of the thinner lines, I don't care for it with this. 15 seconds to dry, but the medium where the lines get a little bit thicker, same tone as the extra fine and the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, gorgeous shading all over it. 22 seconds to dry. The Scrubby shows us a lot of shading, and we get an amazing amount of shading. But the smear test, I do not think it, I'm seeing it much more on camera. So if you need to recover this, you need to put it under a camera, because those lines I do not see in person, but I see them on camera. So yippee for technology. Life Paper has no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and the shading is crazy. Yes. The extra fine is the same tone as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and the shading is still crazy. 12 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the 1.1. On camera, it's looking a little bit darker, but again, we're dealing with more of a, there's more ink. The camera picks it up easier for the thicker lines, and that's what's making it look darker, but it's not darker in person. But the darker ink makes this, or the darker ink, the more ink makes it easier to see. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, shading. That is insane. It's crazy eddies. 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, none whatsoever. Nope, no shading, not for this ink. Because it's crazy shading. All over the place, in the scrubby, in the writing, insane. But you cannot recover if you smeared, because it's just too light. Apica paper, no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. But the shading is gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. It's very nice. I'm not going to beat the crap out of it. I already have. I beat the horse to death. I've resurrected it. I have a zombie horse standing behind me from beating the horse to death about the great shading. The extra fine is the same tone as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it still has that lovely, beautiful, all over shading. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine in the 1.1. Again, it's just showing up on camera more than it is in person. But in person, all of these tones are the same. Looking at the monitor, in fact, all of the tones look more like what I'm seeing on the medium than what I'm seeing up here. These look lighter on camera. It's weird. This color, the camera's having some trouble with. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. The shading is great. 12 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation, and we get plenty of color variation. And a smear test, you couldn't recover it. Nope. Franklin Christoph paper, no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shading. Nope. None at all. Just kidding, because it's crazy. It's in the cell next to the Joker. And the Joker looks at this shading and goes, that stuff's nuts. The extra fine is the same tone as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and the shading is great, occupying the cell next to the Joker with 5 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it is the bunkmate in the cell next to the Joker because the shading is great. It is crazy. 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation, and we get plenty. In a smear test, yeah, I actually think you could recover this on this paper. This is very accurate for what I'm seeing in person. And the Franklin Christoph paper doesn't normally shade a whole lot for inks, and here it does. And that is all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Elixir's Tangerine, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I wanted a nice blue with this orange, and I chose Robert Oster's Bondi-Blue. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Elixir's Tangerine? In a fine or dry pen, it's too light to comfortably read and not pleasant. But in a broad, wet pen, the tones that you get are absolutely pleasant to read, and it's not a problem. So you just have to make sure that you're using it in broader, wetter pens. Then this orange is very nice. Thanks for watching.